Now, I know PlayStation games always get hate for trying to mimic movies with their close-to-lifelike visuals and detailed cutscenes and worlds, but I believe that in 2023, the game that most resembles a movie to me is actually Playdead's second game from 2016, Inside. Now, if you don't know the game, maybe go play it. It's really fun. It's really good. You can catch it on sale for like $2. But if not, these are all the places that you can play it here. Now, of course, I don't say that movie thing as criticism, of course. I love PlayStation games as well, but here, Inside reminds me of some obscure animated short film where the story is vague, but the clear atmosphere and a well-developed questioning and exploration of the world get to happen in a pretty short amount of time. Add in that Playdead learned quite a bit from their first game, Limbo, and you've got yourself one of the best platforming games ever made. Now, I've believed this for years, so let me maintain that view for you here today, so strap in for our 2023 re-review of Inside. If you're new here, normally for reviews I go over the story, the gameplay, the visuals, and of course the sound design, so that's pretty much what I'm going to do here today as well. And with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the story. Now, just like Limbo, there aren't going to be any clear answers to what's going on, but we start the game as a boy who's being hunted. As we traverse countrysides, cityscapes, and even factorial environments, there's quite a few different themes that the player can and will pick up on. Whether it be that conformity and falling in line with social norms is a bad thing, or the clear abuse of the underclass people, there's a lot to interpret however the player sees fit. Or you can be just like me and probably many other players and finish the game and say, what the fuck? This game is absolutely weird. Outside of its pretty on-the-nose themes that is only furthered by the alternate ending, is, in my opinion, a phenomenal atmosphere and a sense of place in the world that is like no other in a game that I've ever played, especially of Inside's size and scope. The progression of your journey in and of itself feels like a great story all on its own, especially after a lot of the unique encounters you face. For example, like, wow, I made it through that facility despite the grudge girl swimming at me while underwater trying to pull me down to my watery death. Now, of course, my point of this video is not to spoil one of the better games of all time, but the runtime for this game isn't very long at all. And after trying to find every possible secret, you may come out of this game with just over 4 hours of runtime. And while I believe that the actual meaning of this game is fully open to interpretation, I can't help but feel that the true message of this game is a bit too obtuse, just like Limbo. And really, without spoilers, that's all there is to say about the story itself. Now, for the gameplay for Inside, it's actually really good. There's no twitchy FPS shooting or sliding, but the boy, as well as anything else you may control, feels super responsive and never feels frustrating. The last game, Limbo, featured the philosophy of trial and death instead of course, trial and error, meaning that you would die many times trying to figure out what exactly the rules to the puzzle you were focusing on were. Now, this was pretty cool at the time, and it definitely rewarded caution, but Inside feels a lot more fair over Limbo in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of things that can and will kill you, but it may not be because you didn't know these things existed. Now, speaking on the game itself, it's really just one big puzzle. The good thing about it is that a lot of the puzzles feel good and never too hard to complete. There are a few puzzles that involve timing and being in the right place at the right time. There's some that are just straight up witty in my opinion. But something that's new to this game is actually enemies and managing their placement and where they're at in the environment in order to progress or even trap them somewhere. And while Inside isn't exactly a horror game, early on, when you're unfamiliar with the world and its rules, your adversary's pursuit of you is going to be pretty tense to say the least. Overall, I walk away from the puzzles in the game feeling like they are a great challenge to the player, while also setting up really cool sci-fi rules for the world that this exists in, but most importantly, showcasing some of the coolest visual imagery in the game. One final thing that I'd actually like to talk about is the improvement to the checkpointing system. Now, there's no save state in either of these games. However, sometimes dying in Limbo would be a lot more frustrating than it ever was to die in Inside. First off, it happened way more, but more importantly, the checkpoints were a lot less generous in Limbo, and here, it really just makes it to where anytime you actually do die, it's really not that hard to get right back to where you were. As far as feeling fair and completely competent as a game, the frame-perfect animations as you make your way and grab different items and climb different environments, swing around, control other bodies with your mind, with my freaking mind, and even submerge yourself in this really cool looking submarine that I wish I could control in my day-to-day life. There's just always a sense of freedom in how you're playing as this character, even if it is one of the most linear games that you may ever play. But as you make your way through these puzzles, you'll notice that a lot of these environments are visually striking. I mentioned countrysides, cityscapes, and even lab and factory type environments. And I believe that's the best way to kind of segue over to the visual aspects of the game. Now, Inside features a minimalist style that really lends itself to the borderline dystopian propaganda imagery that, while isn't on posters, is shown very heavily throughout the game. Everything short of Darth Vader walking around or Adolf Hitler, it really just comes off as rounding the people up and doing whatever you want to do with them. Now, of course, this imagery really does lend itself to the dark atmosphere, but quite literally, this game can get very dark. When you're underwater and it's pitch black around you and all you have is the front headlights, it gets really creepy. Now throw in the fact that there's a girl who's swimming around underwater where her hair is flowing all around, and it looks very good. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it's just striking visually, and it's quite creepy because of it. You can't help but feel like this could very well be a horror game. And it's that attention to detail that happens throughout the entire game. I mentioned earlier that the animations to the player character were frame perfect, and that's true. This game feels like an animated short with the way that there's no HUD, you're basically viewing it all, but you actually have to play it, of course, too. But as you move through each of these environments, you'll notice that each one of them is cram-packed with detail throughout the whole piece. Whether you're tearing a board off the wall and it just happens to hit a bottle or something in the background, you'll notice it roll all the way away. Or towards the end of the game when you're running through facilities and you see people, on high alert in complete danger mode running all around, fighting for their lives to kind of escape the facility. There's always moments like this in the background that makes it feel not like you're just on a 2D plane, but you're actually just running while the screen follows you from the side. So in that way, the game transcends being just a 2D plane of existence and actually feels 3D when it's really not as far as gameplay is concerned. And that is due to the amazing visual style. The game takes advantage of viewpoints of characters looking at you from both directly head-on on the 2D plane as well as from the 3D plane. And while I don't want to risk actually just repeating myself and really hammering the point in, it can't be overemphasized just how many different environments you're seeing in such a short playtime. The ability of the developers to kind of showcase just how much tension there is in a scenario, coming down to the visuals, and even audio, as I'll talk about in just a second, to build the perfect atmosphere, really comes off, especially showcased perfectly in this scene here, where a hound is chasing the player. This is the very beginning of the game, by the way, and they've set it up in such a way that you can make it to where you need to jump from, and the dog is not going to get you. However, the player doesn't exactly know that. All you know is that you have to run. And up until this point, you've already seen where your animations can falter as you're jumping over like a log, or you're actually not sure that you're going to be able to make it. So at the last second you jump, and that's when the dog even tries to reach out and get you. But then you see, acting like a dog that can't get to where they need to be, has retreated and turned back. Now, of course, I'll talk about the audio once again in just a moment, but the visual setup leading into this moment really just shows just how well they planned out every second of this game. And while I do believe that falls apart just a little bit in the open environments where there's a big puzzle across multiple rooms that you need to go through, I do think that perfect animation for every little step does kind of fall apart in those moments, but it's those moments that you realize that you need to get around quickly and you're not so focused on those little details. So it's, once again, pulling back in the perfect way. Oh, and one other thing. When replaying this game and actually going for the 100% completion, I played on the Steam Deck. Now, you can play, of course, pretty much anywhere you want with this game, and it's going to run pretty well. I played it on the Steam Deck, and it actually did a pretty damn good job. It was a fun game, I really enjoyed it, and of course, the game being built for controller just as much as mouse and keyboard, worked perfectly well even on the Steam Deck, and I had no issues visually. There were no resolution problems whatsoever, and for a quick little thing, Inside is one of the greatest games you can get on Steam Deck for $2 during a Steam sale. But I've talked about the visuals, now let's finally circle back around to the audio while we talk about what makes the perfect atmosphere in a game. Now, this game features a lot of water, as well as a lot of on-land portions. Now, whether it be your footsteps through the mud, or trudging through the heavier, or even going down into the water and not hearing a damn thing, there's a lot as far as the water is concerned that really makes this game stand out as far as animations. Echoes in the background of little droplets of water while in a cave, or the cracks on your submarine as it's being attacked, really seal the deal that the water is everything you need for the proper showcase of good audio in this game. Later on, there are sonic booms that go off that really just sound kind of like Jango Fett's bombs from the prequels, if you remember what that's like. So really cool and satisfying sound effects are always something that I like. But then another thing that I really appreciated is how the game not only respects everything in the 3D environment visually, like something coming from far away and seeing you and running up on you, like the hound that I showed you earlier, but also the ability of the game to understand that even on a 2D plane, if something is far away, the audio needs to have a kind of build-up as it comes closer to you. Once again, showcased in the clip that I showed earlier. But really, once again, with the audio, there are no issues for me with this game. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into our final verdict. Playdead's second game from 2016, Inside, is one of the greatest platformers of all time, in my opinion. While it is not the most challenging game, as most platformers tend to be, it is definitely one that puts a heavy emphasis on puzzles and atmosphere. Specifically, the visuals and the audio come together to make a foreboding atmosphere that feels a lot like a dystopian propaganda poster, only playing out in real time throughout this 4-hour runtime. The gameplay itself can be tricky at times, with some of the puzzles being pretty challenging, but never so much so that it came off as frustration to me as the player. With a heavier emphasis on NPCs that are going to hunt the player during chase sequences, and on the inverse of that, more forgiving checkpoints, I really believe that a lot of the gameplay changes made from Inside from the previous game Limbo have been welcome improvements. Unfortunately though, the story of moving through these different landscapes and different environments is pretty much the most concrete story you're ever going to get though. Even with the alternate ending from finding all of the collectibles, there's never anything too set in stone of what the story of the game actually is, and that's super unfortunate because it does feel just a bit obtuse. Now, of course, you can pick the game up for like $2 during any sale, and you can play it pretty much anywhere, so I definitely recommend playing this game in 2023 as it feels like it hasn't aged at all. Now, my name is Falling Hurts, and I do reviews like this sometimes where we look back on games. They're not always going to be games that I consider perfect. I mean, I had some complaints about Limbo, the previous game, and pretty much the next up for reviews, I'm going to try to do one every week or so, but pretty soon we'll be doing Somerville. But until then, consider subscribing. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, and there's going to be a lot of news, reviews, and speculation on this channel, so consider subscribing as we head into the summer and the rest of the year. So once again, Falling Hurts, that's me, and goodbye.